Howdy folks, it's Will here from Flow Mountain Bike, and this is the Orbea Rise. This is a new lightweight, low-powered e-mountain bike that follows in the footsteps of the Lapierre E-Zesty and the Specialized Levo SL. The Rise is built around a detuned Shimano motor and a smaller battery, and along with its weight-optimized build kit, this bike right here comes in well under 19 kilos, which is very light for an e-mountain bike. So what's it actually like to ride, and how does it compare to the Levo SL? Well, I've been riding this bike for the past few weeks to find out. Maybe not. The Orbea Rise is a lightweight, full suspension e-mountain bike that's based on the Occam trail bike, and indeed both bikes share a near identical suspension design and geometry. The Rise is rolling on 29-inch wheels with a 140 or 150mm travel fork on the front and 140mm of rear travel courtesy of the UFO suspension design. The big story with this bike though is the Shimano EP8 RS motor. Now structurally this motor's identical to a regular EP8 motor, but the maximum torque has been limited from 85 Newton meters to 60 Newton meters. The firmware is also different too, and that changes how the power is delivered. Orbea's goal was to create a more natural riding experience that relies less on the motor and more on your legs. The more efficient tune means that Orbea can build the Rise with a smaller and lighter 360 watt-hour battery. The frame is lighter too, since the down tube can be made much slimmer, and it results in a really good looking bike. Now this concept is similar to other lightweight, low-powered e-mountain bikes, and the idea is that if you're not using that full-powered boost mode all the time, and you're finishing rides with a couple of bars of battery life, then why carry around all of that extra weight? The Rise differs to its competitors though, in that it takes an off-the-shelf motor and detunes it. And indeed, we're fascinated that Orbea managed to convince Shimano to modify its EP8 drive unit, though it does say a lot about both brands' confidence in the RS concept. There are 4 models in the Orbea Rise lineup, and this is the Rise M10. It has a retail price of 13,999 Australian dollars. For your money, you're getting Fox factory suspension with a 36 Grip 2 fork and a Float DPX2 shock. There's a Shimano XT drivetrain and 4-piston brakes, a Raceface Turbine R30 wheelset, and a Maxxis tyre combo with a 2.4-inch Dissector EXO on the front and a 2.4-inch Recon EXO Plus on the back. Confirmed weight for our medium-sized test bike here is 18.38 kilos, and that's weighed with the tyres set up tubeless and without pedals. Now to put that in perspective, that's around 4 kilos lighter than the Canyon Spectral-On that we recently tested. So first up, the good stuff. Well, the handling on the Orbea Rise is absolutely fantastic, and that's a result of the low overall weight and the spot-on geometry. There's a nice lengthy wheelbase for stability, and the head angle isn't too slack at 65.5 degrees. With those lightweight wheels and the fact that most of the mass of this bike is concentrated centrally and low down in the frame, it's able to pivot and change direction really easily. It's a great cornering bike, particularly at higher speeds and when you're flip-flopping between successive turns. It's also easy to pick up the front end, and that's a result of the lighter battery inside the down tube, but also the fact that Orbea has spec'd a regular 36 fork and not the heavier e-mountain bike version. The suspension is excellent. We love that Orbea includes an additional volume spacer for the rear shock in the box with the bike. With that bigger spacer installed, there's a bit more bottom-out support, and it gives this bike a really sprightly and energetic ride quality that will suit an active rider. It's also a superb technical climber. You're put into a fantastic position with a steep 76.5 degree seat angle, and the chainstay length is quite long at 445mm, and that helps to keep this bike planted on really steep, awkward technical climbs. The EP8 RS motor is also a big contributor to this bike's ride quality, and on the trail it does feel very different to a conventional EP8 motor. Now the engagement at the pedals is just as quick, but the acceleration is softer with a more subtle feel to the initial power delivery. The power curve itself is also much more progressive, and this means the harder you push on the pedals, the more power you get out of the motor. It's got a really intuitive feel on the trail with a very clear link between what your legs are putting in and what the motor is putting out to the rear wheel. What I really love about this motor though is how easy the power is to modulate, and this is quite apparent on technical climbs. You can pedal full tilt out of the saddle without fear of the motor erupting a sudden burst of uncontrollable torque. On some awkward, rocky switchback climbs, I was able to clean them without fail every time on the Orbea Rise, where I would sometimes struggle to clean them on the Merida E160 and the Canyon Spectral On. On those tricky sections, it never surprises you and it has a really predictable feel. The motor does prefer you to stay in a narrower band of cadence between 75 and 90 RPM. Because of this, Orbea has fitted the Rise with an E13 crankset and a smaller 32-tooth chainring instead of the typical 34-tooth chainring that we're used to seeing on Shimano drive units. Even still, I found myself using the gears more than I would on a regular e-mountain bike, and I certainly made plenty use of that big 51-tooth cassette sprocket. You certainly can't mash your way up in any gear on this bike. It really helps to downshift into an easier gear and try and anticipate those technical features and steep switchback climbs. As for the downsides of the Orbea Rise, well, of course, compared to a full-powered e-mountain bike, there's not as much gut-churning power on more abrupt climbs. It's an amazing technical climber on typical mountain biking terrain, but if you're into climbing with superhuman speed or muscling your way up weird moto-style climbs, there are better tools for the job. Also, if everyone in your riding crew is on a full-powered e-mountain bike, you are going to be working a little bit harder on the Rise in order to keep up. Even in the full-powered boost mode, on steady, non-technical climbs, the Rise was slower by around 3 to 4 kilometers per hour on average. While I'm on the motor, it's worth pointing out that the EP8 RS motor makes exactly the same clacking noise as the regular EP8 motor. Now, there's nothing wrong with the motor, it's a perfectly normal function, and you do get used to that noise over time. That said, it would be fantastic if it didn't make that noise in the first place. My biggest gripe with this bike is with the tyres, which are really holding back the Rise on more technical terrain. They're fine on hard-packed trails, but as soon as things are loose or wet, they leave a lot to be desired. In particular, the Recon is too light and the tread is too shallow to provide proper bite on loose climbs. Yeah, it may be a lightweight e-mountain bike, but it's still an 18-kilo bike that loves to ride hard and fast. Now, I should mention that Orbea does give you the option to change the tyres at the point of purchase. You can upgrade to a Maxxis Minion tyre combo, which would surely unlock this bike's high-speed potential. Also, while the cockpit is nice and clean, the interface may be too minimalistic for some riders. The E7000 controller is a bit vague, and there's no beeping sound when you change modes. The tiny LEDs on the junction box are too faint, and it's basically impossible to tell the difference between trail and boost, especially if it's a sunny day.
Off, that's eco, trail, and boost.
Yep.
So there's a tiny red LED that comes on in boost, but from up here, it just looks green to me between those boost, trail, boost, trail.
Also, the LED for the battery level indicator only changes to a different color at 20%, which is too late. Now, if you're a Garmin user, it is possible to pair your device with the Rise, and that will allow you to display key metrics including cadence, the assist mode, the remaining battery life, and estimated range. Unfortunately though, that option is not available for my Wahoo GPS at this point in time. As an alternative, you could add on a Shimano EM800 display at the point of purchase, and that would help to put a load of that useful information directly in front of you. You might be wondering how much range you can get out of the Orbea Rise with that small 360 watt-hour battery. And most of my test rides were between 40 to 50 kilometers long with around 1,400 to 1,500 meters of elevation gain. Now that's really impressive and not that far off the Canyon Spectral On that I recently tested. It goes to show that while this is a small battery, that efficient motor, the lightweight build kit, and those fast rolling tyres mean you can get a surprisingly decent amount of range out of the Rise. I also conducted a separate shuttle test because I wanted to compare the Rise to some of the full-powered e-mountain bikes that we've recently tested. The results of that shuttle test are in the full review of the Orbea Rise. To check it out, click the link in the video description below. Now, out of the lightweight e-mountain bikes on the market, the Specialized Levo SL is the biggest competitor to the Orbea Rise. They're very similar bikes in terms of wheel size and suspension travel, but the Rise does have better geometry and it's the better handling bike as a result. The longer wheelbase and slacker head angle makes it more stable on the descents, and the steeper seat tube angle and longer chainstays keep it more planted on the climbs. It's not quite as nimble at slow speeds on tight trails, but the more technical the terrain and the faster the pace, the better the Rise gets. The Levo SL does have a 1 kilo weight advantage thanks to the smaller 320 watt-hour battery and SL 1.1 motor. However, it has significantly less power with a maximum torque output of just 35 Newton meters, and that's quite noticeable on the climbs. Both motors are very intuitive and efficient, with no perceptible drag once you go above the 25 km/h cutoff. The Levo SL motor does have a higher pitched whine on the trail, but it doesn't have the same clacking noise that the EP8 motor suffers from. And the Levo SL has the better user interface, though we expect Specialized is already working on implementing the new Mastermind TCU display into the next generation Levo SL, which will take it to a whole new level. Until then though, the Orbea Rise is currently the faster, better handling and more capable bike out of the two. And depending on the model you're looking at, it also comes with a more desirable spec for the money. And that, my friends, brings us to the verdict of the Orbea Rise. Orbea isn't the first brand to embrace the lightweight, low-powered e-mountain bike concept, but with the Rise, it's delivered what is the most compelling option yet. The stripped-back approach has created a beautiful bike with an impressively low weight. The suspension and handling are brilliant, and the custom EP8 RS motor provides progressive and predictable power delivery that ensures that you never feel like a passenger. Along with the option to tune that motor's output, the Orbea Rise has effectively bridged the gap between the Levo SL and a traditional full-powered e-mountain bike. It's not necessarily the right option for existing e-mountain bike addicts who are hungry for maximum power and the biggest battery possible. Instead, the Orbea Rise is a very attractive proposition for regular mountain bikers who are looking to expand their riding capacity without turning the experience into something that's totally different. Now, if you folks would like to read more about the Orbea Rise, there is a load more detail in the full review over at flowmountainbike.com. If you've got any questions for me about the Rise, chances are they're already answered in the full review. And make sure you click the link in the video description below to check it out. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Tooroo!